All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for participating in our Zoom video public workshop for potential amendments to District Rule 4550, Conservation Management Practices. We have staff members participating in person and via Zoom video teleconference. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation on Zoom video and audio teleconference. Before we begin, I want to review some important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your other communication devices, such as your cell or desk phone. This will ensure that we are not hearing any feedback that can interrupt the meeting. Only district staff will be visible on Zoom. Members of the public are asked to unmute themselves when they are recognized to make a public comment. After the presentation, staff will announce the public comment period has opened, and staff will recognize any public attendee who has indicated they wish to speak. On the Zoom video application, please press the raise hand button so that you may be recognized to speak, and be sure to unmute yourself. If you are participating by Zoom teleconference, press *9 to raise your hand so that you may be recognized to speak, and staff will call the last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. Be sure to press *6 to unmute and mute yourself. I did want to note too that once we get to the comment period of the scoping meeting, an email address is also available to you at webcast@valleyair.org. You can send your comment or question to that email address. I'll be able to look at that here live to see if any comments or questions come through that email address, and I'll be able to read that for everybody to hear what your comment or question is. So we'll go ahead and get the workshop started this afternoon if we can call up the presentation. Just wanted to introduce myself. I'm John Klassen. I'm the Director of Air Quality Science and Planning at the Air District. I'm being joined by Emily Nealons, Air Quality Specialist, who's the lead on this project, and we're going to walk you through this presentation to give you a little bit of background on Rule 4550 and where this is going to be going over the next year. So just the first slide here, just a little bit of background on the challenges that the Valley has with air quality. We have unmatched challenges because of our combination of geography, meteorology, and topography. We're in a bowl, we're in a valley where we have mountain ranges to the east, the west, to the south. We have meteorology that often places a lid on top of the bowl that can trap emissions, that can build up to high levels of ozone and PM 2.5 throughout the year. So because of that, we are designated as what's called extreme non-attainment for the 8-hour ozone standards and serious non-attainment for the PM 2.5 standards. Because of that, we need to get significant emissions reductions going beyond our already strict rule limits to continue to reduce emissions to get us into attainment of those federal air quality standards. Now, NOx is a key precursor to both the formation of ozone and PM 2.5. So getting reductions in NOx is key for our overall attainment strategies, but getting emissions reductions and direct PM 2.5 is also really key to help us attain those PM 2.5 standards. Within our 2018 PM 2.5 plan, which was a comprehensive strategy to attain the PM 2.5 standards, there is a commitment to continuing to get more emissions reductions from mobile sources and a number of stationary and area source categories, including agricultural operations, which is the focus of this rule and this project we'll be diving into over this next year. Looking a little more closely at the commitments from our 2018 PM 2.5 plan, this contained a commitment to further evaluate ways to promote conservation tillage practices and other potential enhancements to the CMP program to reduce dust from ag operations. One of those could be more widespread implementation of conservation tillage practices, cover cropping, no-till, low-till, strip-till, and precision agriculture through additional incentives may help to further limit PM 2.5. We'll continue to work with the Ag Tech Group to evaluate the feasibility and effectiveness of potential new options that are out there based on new technologies and approaches. We'll continue to also evaluate the feasibility and effectiveness of CMPs on fallow land that are tilled or otherwise worked with implements of husbandry to reduce windblown PM 2.5 emissions. So we'll continue to dig into this, look at the latest research, work with USDA, NRCS as needed, ag sources, researchers, who recognize the Valley's unique soil characteristics and ag practices to ensure that we can put together some Valley-specific solutions to make sure those are considered with whatever we evaluate here. Now I'm going to pass it over to Emily Nealon, who's going to give us a little more background on Rule 4550 and some of the implementation successes that we've seen so far.
Perfect. Thank you, John. So a little bit of background on Rule 4550. This rule was first adopted in August of 2004 as a PM10 control measure. This rule is the first of its kind in the nation and was initially approved by EPA in February of 2006, in which they determined that the rule met best available control measure requirements. This rule established a unique menu approach of control techniques to accommodate a wide variability of agricultural industries found in the valley. Through this program, selected CMPs are listed on application forms that are submitted to the district for approval as a CMP plan. These approved plans are enforced through on-site inspections by district staff, and operators are required to submit applications to modify plans when they're changing their CMP selections. This rule is applicable to on-field farming and agricultural operation sites within the San Joaquin Valley. CMP plans are required for farms with 100 acres or more, dairies with 500 or more mature cows, cattle feedlots with 190 or more cows, turkey ranches with 55,000 or more turkeys, chicken ranches with 125,000 or more chickens, and lastly, chicken egg ranches with 82,000 or more laying hens. Through this rule, operations are required to maintain records, verifying the use of approved CMPs, and to date, our rule requirements have reduced PM10 emissions by 35.3 tons per day, which represents a 24% reduction from this source category. Through this program, there's a few different CMP categories that operators can select from, which includes land preparation or cultivation, harvest, other, unpaved roads, unpaved vehicle or equipment areas, manure handling and storage, overall management or feeding, and lastly, open areas and feeding. In regards to the CMP practices, these practices can include practices that reduce or eliminate the need to disturb the soil or manure, practices that protect the soil from wind erosion, equipment modifications to physically produce less PM10, applying water or dust suppressants to reduce emissions entrained by moving vehicles and equipment, reducing speed or access on unpaved roads and equipment areas, and lastly, alternative practices to open burning. Since the adoption of this program, the district has worked to implement the strategy and work with stakeholders to ensure compliance and overall program success. The district created a special CMP application form, which includes simplified checklists to ensure a streamlined application process for operators. Additionally, the district hosted a number of workshops to assist sources with compliance. The district has made a number of notable achievements since the adoption of this rule, including receiving over 8,500 CMP plans since 2005, in addition to over 7,000 CMP plan modification applications. These practices encompass 3.23 million acres of farmland, and most notably, the CMP program received EPA Region 9's 2005 Environmental Award for Outstanding Achievement. Conservation tillage practices include no-till, low or reduced till, mulching, strip or zonal tillage, and cover cropping. The benefits of these practices can include an increase in soil water retention and a reduction of soil erosion, improvement in plant growth and yields, which have been shown through different research studies, improved soil health, a reduction in emissions of criteria pollutants, and less passes needed to till acreage, which can result in fuel savings, reduced wear and tear on equipment, and labor savings. For the rule evaluation process for Rule 4550, staff will be analyzing the technological and economic feasibility of these different practices, and will be taking into account costs, cost effectiveness, and considerations depending on specific CMPs. Through this, cost and feasibility of the most effective practices available will be evaluated, and district staff will also be conducting a review of requirements in other air districts. Additionally, a third-party consultant will be conducting a socioeconomic impact analysis in order to evaluate the regional and economic impacts of proposed amendments. Throughout the rule development process, there will be ongoing opportunities for public input. We'll be hosting a number of public workshops through 2022, and we'll also be providing updates to the Citizens Advisory Committee, the Environmental Justice Advisory Group, and District Governing Board meetings. And I'll pass it over to John to go a little bit more into detail on the timeline for this process.
All right, thank you, Emily, for that overview. Just a note here on the steps involved in the rule amendment process. We start with a scoping meeting, which is what we're doing this afternoon to get the process started. We'll have some public workshops throughout this next year where we can share some different rule concepts, get feedback, eventually share more specifics on where we're planning to go with the rule. We will eventually publish the proposed rule for feedback and a review period for comments before it going to our governing board for their consideration later in the year 2022, next year. And public participation is certainly invited throughout this entire process. Emily Nealand will be your main point of contact for this rule. If you have any questions or comments throughout the process, you have her contact information here for address, phone number, email. We also encourage you to sign up the listserv that's listed on this slide. You can connect with that, get signed up, and you can get notices of when we're having different workshops or posting different documents related to this rulemaking. So at this point, we will go ahead and open it up for any comments and questions that you might have. And just a reminder, if you want to send in your comment or question to the email address webcast@valyair.org, you can do that as well. I'll be able to view that here live, and I can read those out if you have a comment or question that you send to that email address. So with that, we'll go ahead and go to Zoom and see if there are any comments at this time.
We have Roger for public comment.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, Roger.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to provide some comments here. I realize this is more of a scoping meeting than the actual rule workshop, but I think there's some important points to make here. First, again, I realize it's a scoping meeting, but I believe that there's a lot of information that had not been provided. First, the CMPs that are currently in the program took years to develop. We worked with UC Davis, USDA ARS, ARB, EPA, and the district over many years to do actual measurements in the field and find out what practices worked and what didn't, and what were actually effective in reducing particulate matter. The second part is that a lot of those were done in conjunction with the California Regional Particulate Matter Air Quality Study, or what we called CRAPACS, which again was a coalition of industry, regulatory agencies, and researchers geared to research particulate matter in the San Joaquin Valley. And that was done over many years and millions of dollars of research. And one of the most important things is that most of that research showed that PM 2.5 wasn't really associated with field work type applications in agriculture. And a couple of those, including the integrated monitoring study that took samples of air quality episodes in 1999, 2000, and 2001, and it showed that PM 2.5 concentrations were dominated more by ammonium nitrate and carbon aerosols, and geologic materials accounted for less than 1% of the measured concentrations. And then similarly for where we did specific examples or specific measurements on whether it was cotton gins or cotton harvesting or almond harvesting or infield work, it was always showed concentrations of PM 2.5 to be 2% or less. So I'm a little curious as to the focus here on agricultural operations and trying to assume that we're going to get major PM 2.5 reductions, if any at all. Not opposed to looking at it, which leads me to my final point is that on all of those measures, again, we actually did actual field measurements. And I would hope that as whatever is developed through this process is based on actual measurements. And it's a very tight time frame you've put forward here. It looks like less than a year, sometimes to get research dollars, to coordinate with universities to do the measurements, to look at different practices. A lot of these are, it's one season, you got one shot. If the weather doesn't cooperate, we're looking at the next year. It seems very aggressive to be able to accomplish what it is you guys are looking at. Again, I'm not saying that we're opposed to looking at them. We're doing conservation tillage research right now, as a matter of fact, but we've been doing so for probably close to 13 years. So just want to make sure to caution everybody that make sure that if you're going to come up with additional CMPs, that they truly are effective, that they are truly reducing PM 2.5 and reducing PM 2.5 during those critical times of the year where we're experiencing sequences, and not just doing it as an exercise. It needs to accomplish what the district is looking to accomplish here. And there's a methodology, there's a process, and still to this date, the San Joaquin Valley Air District is part of the study agency that includes the Air Resources Board and EPA Region 9. I would hope that those measures, any research, would go through that study agency as well. So those are my comments, and just appreciate the opportunity to make them today.
Thank you, Roger, for those comments and all that great historical context. When this was put together initially, yeah, definitely, like you said, we're just kicking off this process. We're not sure exactly where it could go or what this could look like after we do our evaluation, but we'll certainly be diving into what's been learned in recent years from different practices, seeing what's possible and seeing what we can do with this. So looking forward to continuing to collaborate and talk with anybody who wants to be involved in the process. Thanks for those comments. Okay, not seeing any other comments on Zoom, and I'm checking the webcast here, and I don't see any comments on the webcast, but it looks like we have one on Zoom.
Kevin for public comment.
There we go. Unmute. Hello.
Hey, Kevin, go ahead.
Hey, thank you. Just want to reiterate a lot of the things that Roger had just brought up. In working in concert with the original 4550 intent, and then all the research between the industry and USDA, public and private dollars, UC Davis, others, USDA, ARS, Dr. Hatfield. I agree with Roger. I'm not sure we implemented the rule. We met attainment for PM10 with a lot of room to spare, and not really sure how much more blood is left in that turnip. So definitely want to be engaged in the process. And we've done everything based on scientific research in the field, in the real world, not modeling based on assumptions. So want to continue with the success stories that we've had and keep that approach. And if we need to implement some faster moving paces through ag tech to get some things that might be identified, but quite frankly, outside of farmers potentially checking another box on the menu, I really don't know what the hell you're going to get. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Kevin. All right, with that, looks like we don't have any other comments on Zoom. I don't see any comments or questions coming through the webcast email inbox. So I think we'll go ahead and close our scoping meeting for this afternoon. Thank you for those of you who attended, for the comments that we got today. Please stay in touch. Go sign up for that listserv on the slides. You can be updated when we have future meetings. And thank you all for your involvement, and looking forward to working with you on this in this next year. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.